Hello, greetings everybody. I want to welcome you all here to Rock Legends on the Prog Monster. I'm the host of this show. My name is Murph. This is the show in which I pick an artist who I admired and liked and maybe at some point was an idol of. I had the idol towards him. And today we're going to talk about Ace Frehley, who passed away recently, guitar player, lead guitar player, vocalist, music writer for Kiss. One of the original members, of course, we all know that. And we're going to talk about Ace Frehley. And I'm not going to give you a history of Ace Frehley here. There are other channels out there who do a much better job of this. I'm not going to give you a breakdown of every album that he played on. I'm just going to talk about my own personal memories about Ace Frehley's influence upon myself, and I think probably upon many people in the rock genre. So that's my choice for today. That's what we're doing here on Rock Legends, Ace Frehley. So Ace Frehley, of course, born in the 50s. I think he was born in 51. I believe it was 1951. Would make him 74, so that makes perfect sense to me. He was the youngest of the original four members of Kiss. A bit of a strange character, to say the least. But also, I think one of those people that people gravitated towards. He had a lot of friends and a lot of people in his life who liked him, who he hung out with, who he was friends with. Very outgoing, easy to get along with type of guy. Had a bit of sense of humor, quirky or otherwise. Yes, he had drug issues and alcohol issues and sometimes did some wacky things. But he was definitely a rock star in every true sense of the word. When I think of rock stars, I think of guys who are great at what they do, who put out something unusual, who maybe are in the headlines for goofy stuff they've done, or their on-stage antics, or their whole persona. And I think he qualifies in all those areas. So I'm going to bring you back a little bit to pre-Kiss, I guess, is what I might do. I'm looking for one particular album. I did pull out some of his albums as a guideline. So prior to this album, in 1973, which is Kiss's debut album, Ace Frehley was basically a kind of a roadie for bands, but got himself in trouble sometimes because he would go on stage. He wasn't actually a roadie. He was just go on stage and pretend he was one just so he could be close to the music. Got him in a little heat there. But for those of you who know a bit about Kiss history, he was the third member. So Gene and Paul had auditions. They were auditioning for a guitar player and a drummer. Actually, I think he was the last member. Yeah, I stand corrected. Peter actually went for... Yeah, Peter was actually the third member of Kiss. And we'll get into Ace Frehley and why I thought that for a minute in a few seconds. But basically... they put out an ad for a drummer and a lead guitarist. They went actually to see Peter play, liked him, thought he fit perfectly. He had a great voice. That's what they wanted. They wanted to be very Beatles-ish. They wanted all four members to sing. If they could get that, that's what they wanted. And Peter, of course, has a great voice and fit very much in with it. But you got to also remember at that time they had... no kind of money or anything, so they were basically getting the guy they could get, and Peter was willing to do whatever they wanted, so they took him on. And they played basically as a three-piece for a while until they started auditioning for a lead guitar player, and they got people that came for the auditions, including, I believe, Bob... I can't remember his last name now. Anyways, he showed up for the audition, and Ace Frehley actually showed up for the audition while somebody else was playing and just started setting up while the guy was playing. typical Ace behavior. Shows up with two wrong sneakers. Probably couldn't see when he was getting dressed in the dark. Many of us have done that. And auditioned for Kiss. And they were impressed with his playing. He was good. And even though he was a bit of an oddball, they thought this guy could be the guy for us. And eventually he did become the guy for Kiss and played on this album, their debut album. They decided they wanted to go full makeup. They wanted to do something nobody else had done. Full makeup. Their show, the entertainment was the main thing to them, not the music at that time, even though the music was important and is the reason why I still listen to them, is I like the music. But, you know, he contributed songs on here like Cold Gin, which was very much a stable song for Kiss in the early days. Yeah, and there's his original makeup, the silver makeup. Very silver here. And stood out. Now, initially, my favorite member of the band was Kiss, like everybody else, or so many people, not everybody, of course, but a lot of people were drawn to Kiss because of the antics of Gene Simmons. They were outlandish, bombastic, outrageous, breathing fire and spitting blood. People had to see what this was all about. The other guys were good, don't get me wrong, they were great on stage, but that's what drew people in. And that's what drew me in. And for a while, Gene Simmons was my favorite member. I don't know how long, probably less than a half a year. Once I began to realize the kind of character he was, I started gravitating more towards the people who interested me more. I was never a big Peter Criss fan. I have my reasons for that, but I'm not going to get into it here. But both Paul and Ace I liked. I thought they were more rock star-like and not crazy like Gene Simmons. And they both had Paul had great voices, and Ace had that guitar. That's what drew me into Ace, was his guitar, his spacey kind of way of doing things, his calling himself the spaceman. I was into science fiction and all that, so it made perfect sense for me to be drawn into him. He was appeared to be more in concert, at least, and on the albums to be more laid back and quiet. And I identified with that much more, and that's how come I came to like Ace Frehley as my favorite member. And once he took over as my favorite member, he also took over as my favorite guitar player, and he became the first kind of Kiss, not just Kiss, but rock idol in general, who I absolutely thought was idol. I had more pictures of him on my wall. I liked his stuff more. The songs that he put out were much better. You know, you go into their second album here, which I'm going to pull up, Hotter Than Hell. To me, the two of the best songs on here are Parasite, which is probably my favorite off the album, and Strange Ways, which were both written by Ace, but he didn't sing. That was the thing I always felt weird. Like Strange Ways, he had Peter doing the vocals here. Parasite, I believe it was Gene. Both of them great tunes and are stable in the Kiss catalog and have been for a long time. This is a great album. Production not so great, but the album itself, the songs, fantastic. And so I thought Ace's creativity was the most Kiss-like of all of them. The other guys would go off and do different things here and there, but Ace always stayed kind of true to that Kiss sound. And that's what intrigued me, and that's why he became my favorite member of the band and my actual favorite guitarist, and I actually idolized him for most of my early music history, which started probably in 74, 75, and carried on with Kiss being the only and mostly only dominant band for me until the late 70s and 78, when I started kind of branching out. Mid 78. Up until that point, he was the guy for me. So other albums that I chose for him, you know, you've got your iconic guitar solo here on Detroit Rock City, and of course Flaming Youth, which was written by him, was one of the first keyboard used songs by Kiss as well. And then of course you got Love Gun, where you get Shock Me here. This is probably the first song that he sang on, but it was also the one with the most memorable guitar solo of all of them. And there's lots of memorable guitar solos, but this one, killer. I also like I Stole Your Love, the guitar solo, and that's fantastic as well. But this brings me to these two albums, Kiss and Kiss Alive 2, where I think Ace excels live. Of all the members, I think he excels the most live. The solos on some of these tracks here were fantastic. The riffs, songs like Rock Bottom and Black Diamond, Strutter, all these were fantastic. The solo on Firehouse, Parasite is fantastic on here as well as some of Kiss's, of some of the songs he wrote, like Cold Gin. Great stuff. Even more so on this loud, screeching album, Kiss Alive 2. It's a nice shot of all four of them here. One of the best, most iconic shots of them. Of course, he does his Shock Me, legendary Shock Me solo here. And he also on the the fifth side, or the fourth side, I should say, you got 4 songs here or 5 songs that are basically studio versions. They did the fourth side was a studio version, and his was Rocket Ride, which is just an absolutely killer song. Typical Ace Frehley song. Just love it. He did other stuff for Kiss. Dynasty, Unmasked, even The Elder. He played probably as many songs as Paul and Gene at that point in time, because Peter was basically out the door by then. But really, this is the album that set him apart. This is the most Kiss-like of the 4 solos, and maybe the best Kiss-labeled album out there. Now, he did have, I think he was played on 22 Kiss albums. On 12 Kiss albums, and then another 10 or so solo albums. I never really followed his solo career other than this, which was still under the Kiss label. This is a magnificent masterpiece, maybe one of the great rock albums of its time. Certainly one of my favorite albums. We all know that. I've talked about this album at length on very many different episodes, but I like the way in which they did these portraits of each of them on each of their albums. I thought were outstanding. This album, produced by Eddie Kramer, is outstanding. It's an outstanding album. His best solo and maybe the best Kiss album ever released. Of his solo albums, probably Anomaly I like. I did do a video on 10,000 Volts, which he released recently. I wasn't a big, huge fan of the album. I did like the 2 Frehley Comet albums. Were both pretty good, but I never really followed any of the other stuff. I guess in fairness to Ace, I measured them all against this album, and I found them all wanting. I've never been a huge fan of his solo stuff. I preferred him in Kiss. I would have liked it if he'd stayed in the band, but he didn't. So it was a bit of a disappointment. And in retrospect, I think maybe part of the reason I drifted away from Kiss is once he left, I didn't care much for the stuff. I did stay with Creatures of the Night and the Lick It Up album. I thought were both good, but then after that I was gone, and I've never really listened to any of the other stuff. I haven't even listened to the one with Psycho Circus, in which he came back. I just, at that point, it was over for me. But I always liked Ace Frehley. So I guess my liking for Ace Frehley kind of changed once it got into the Dynasty era. Yes, I still think he was my favorite member. There's no doubts about that. But other guitar players started to have an impact on me. Specifically, Alex Lifeson and Steve Howe became the 2 guys for me, 2 of my favorites. And then over the years, other guitarists have really kind of taken over that mantle of absolutely fantastic stuff. Steve Hackett comes to mind, David Gilmour, even Pete Townsend, who I think is a good rock guitarist, but not necessarily a great solo guitar player. I think Ace was better than him in that regard, and maybe I'll take some heat for that, but I don't know that Ace was a fantastic guitar player. I think he was a good guitar player, But what he was really good at, there was two things he was excellent at. Riffs. He has some of the most iconic riffs came from his guitar. And the solos were very unique and very Ace Frehley sounding. And I think they led to a lot of people playing guitar because of him. A lot of bands directly say that he was a major influence on them. Lots of metal bands anyways. I think Ace Frehley, well, maybe not in the same caliber of some of these magnificent guitar players out there, but definitely one that had a huge impact on a lot of people and on myself as well. I always liked his guitar solos the best of anything Kiss did. Still do, actually. Some of the other things about Ace that I liked is his kind of nonchalant mannerisms about stuff. He never took things overtly seriously like Gene and Paul, who were very dedicated to the movement of the band upward and all of the work that was entailed. Without those two, the band probably would never exist. There's no two ways about it. They were the backbone of Kiss getting off the ground and staying off the ground and becoming the big band they were. No doubts about it. But Ace's influence cannot be underestimated. He was more laid back than the other two. The fans, people who like Ace, they just love him for his guitar, but they love him for his personality as well. The kind of goofy kind of laugh that he had. You always knew it was Ace when he was talking. There's no doubt about it. Even when he sang, he had that very distinct sound to his voice. This is one of the few bands out there that have 4 singers in it that all are good. There's no bad singers here. They all have distinctive sounds, though, and I think Ace certainly fit into that as well. The other thing about Ace that I liked was his kind of no-nonsense his actually full of nonsense type of way was. Some of the interviews they did, the Tom Snyder interview comes to mind where he's laughing, and you could see the other guys, Paul and Gene, are just irritated as hell, but he didn't care. He was going to do what he wanted to do. Always making jokes about stuff, the laugh, and all that. And kind of the fun-loving guy, I think. Him and Peter were the fun-loving guys of the band. The other two were much more serious, but you needed both because people weren't just going to come in there if it was just all serious all the time. They needed a little bit of both. And it's not surprising that the two most popular members, to me, probably the two most popular members of the band were Peter and Ace, because people recognized that they were more down to earth. Yeah, they both had their drug issues for sure, and the other two didn't, but the other two had other issues, so it goes with the territory. But for me, I have nothing but fond memories of Ace Frehley. I'm sad that he's gone. I always thought he would last longer than some of the others, but he did get electrocuted once on stage and was out for a while and burnt his fingers and everything. But he came back and he played at the end of the concert. He came back up and he played. Many people would have stayed down, but he wasn't that way. And that's the great thing about him. Yeah, he said lots of stuff that was kind of crazy at times too, but he's a rock star, and he was every bit the rock star. He was also friends with John Belushi. They had a kind of friendship that went back. But Ace was one of those guys. While Gene and Paul and them would be doing the business part, he would get to know members from the bands that were playing as their backups, like Rush. He became good friends with Alex and Geddy. They had their little thing after with the bag and all that stuff, that he enjoyed that kind of thing. He liked people. He got along with people. He liked the party atmosphere. Definitely the party kind of guy. So for me, I will always remember Ace Frehley as that cool-looking guy on stage with his guitar burning and making those legendary kind of catchy guitar solos with the makeup and the and all that. I'll remember all that. I'll also remember him as the guy during the interviews that was funny as hell. I thought he was fantastic. To me, he looked every part the rock star. I always remember those things. And I think about his music, especially this album. This was a staple in my car. So I had about 4 or 5 albums that were like albums that I kept in my car all the time. Get the Knack by the Knack, Heaven Tonight by Cheap Trick. This one, Rush's A Farewell to Kings. Those ones were the ones I kept in the car all the time, and so much so that when I sold my car, this one was in the CD player and went with it. So I had to buy the album again. So this is the newer version one, but I do have the other cover, which also has no CD in it because it's in some car somewhere. Yeah, so those were my stable ones. And this one specifically was my favorite to play in the car. I would crank this one to the max all the time when I'm driving. Rip it out. Absolutely killer track. That is the best track for driving. Sometimes too fast, but yeah, definitely that. And I love the whole album. It's got a great sound to it. It has some killer ripper songs on it. It has songs that are more kind of poppy or radio friendly. It also has the absolute emotionally charged instrumental at the end of the album, Fractured Mirror. Absolutely crazy song. I love it. So for me, I'll always remember Ace Frehley as that album, driving with me in the car, his quirkiness and his great guitar solos, his onstage presence, and his no nonsense, telling it the way it is, getting under Gene and Paul's skin all the time. In deference to Gene and Paul, he must have been very difficult to work with. Probably drove them crazy because they weren't like that at all. But they both need to just forget about it. It's over now, and just let it go, and remember this guy as being one of their brothers. He's part of the Kiss family, as same as Peter. You know, I may not be a huge fan of Peter Criss, at least not of him particularly. I love his vocal part. I think he's the best vocalist in the band. But they're all part of that same family. You know, they each have something about them that you could detest, and they each have something about them that you could like. And so I'm going to look at it that way. And for me, I wanted to do something on Ace Frehley, and this is to me the most important thing. Ace, you will be missed. This is maybe the most impactful death, other than Neil Peart's, for me since I've started following rock music. There's not been many people that have had such an impact emotionally on me as Ace Frehley. And so I want to end off by saying, Ace, you'll be missed, and rest in peace, brother. Take care and have yourself a good evening, everybody. Goodbye.